Well, silly me. I thought I had already given you my wide receiver rankings for the 2015 NFL Draft, and I realized I had just done scouting reports and actually hadn't done an actual, like, positional ranking for the draft. Oopsie daisies. Now, here's what I can tell you. We're getting really close to the NFL Draft. I'm probably not going to get caught up on everything and get all the positions done. I've got wide receivers done. I've got running backs done. I've got edge rushers done. And I may or may not get defensive linemen done for sure before the draft. Everything else in terms of like prospect rankings, you might not get until after the draft. And that seems kind of silly, but honestly, even after the draft, that still doesn't mean that you can't still rate them and evaluate them because they still haven't seen an NFL field. So we'll see what happens. I might just, once the draft is done, do draft grades for each team, and then that's the end of it, and look forward to the next NFL season, maybe focus a little bit more on the NBA playoffs. I'm not really sure. But anyways, for now, you can look down in the description box below, and you can see my overall rankings for the wide receivers in this 2015 NFL Draft class. And as I've mentioned on numerous occasions, I feel that this is another really good, really strong, and deep wide receiver class. Not quite as good as 2014, but that's not bad. This 2014 may very well be the best ever. Now, in terms of the difference between this year's class and last year's class, I think it's twofold. Number one, I think the quality at the top was better in 2014. And number two, I think the depth throughout all 7 rounds and even into the undrafted ranks was better in 2014. But again, for teams that are in need of wide receiver help, they're in luck because there's all different types of guys. There's big guys, there's fast guys, there's the quick twitch slot athletes, there's guys with return abilities. There's all different types of guys. So if you need wide receiver help and you don't dip into this draft, then you're fucking foolish because there is help to be had. There is plenty of help there, especially I think in the first 4 to 5 rounds of this draft. Most certainly, beyond question, one of the best classes in terms of prospects in this year's NFL draft, beyond question. Now, in terms of the debate heading into this year's draft, one of the big debates is which wide receiver would you take? Is it Kevin White or is it Amari Cooper? Who's the real number 1 guy? And I've always felt for a while now that Kevin White was the number 1 guy. And the reason I say that, he has more size. To me, he plays with more speed. He has more of that big play explosive ability, a larger catch radius, the ability to make tougher plays and bigger, more spectacular plays, which is something that you need out of a number 1 type of wide receiver. Now, there are concerns, sure, about him being pretty much a one-year wonder at West Virginia, and I understand that. But you have to look at Amari Cooper, too, at the same token and look at the system that he played in 2014 at Alabama and wonder if that helped elevate his performance, help elevate his production above maybe what it should actually be. Now, let me get this out there. I still think Amari Cooper is going to be a very, very good wide receiver in the National Football League. I think he is a number 1 wide receiver in the National Football League. If a team takes him in the top 10 or even in the top 5, I most certainly am not going to knock them for drafting Amari Cooper. Because this guy is smooth, he's polished, he's a great route runner, he's got very good initial quickness, and I think he's got better explosiveness to a degree than maybe we give him credit for, and he's got better speed than maybe we give him credit for. But in my mind, he's only the number 3 wide receiver prospect in this draft. I not only like Kevin White better, but I also like Devante Parker a little bit better, a guy that's a little bit longer. Yes, I have some concerns about his size when it comes to durability, but here's a longer guy that I think is more explosive. I can make more of the big plays down the field that NFL teams want. And I think Devante Parker could be an even better pro than he was a college wide receiver. Now, before I had said I would put Cooper maybe 4th or 5th on my board in terms of wide receivers, and I've changed on that, and I'm well within my rights to do that. I've put him at number 3. You know, it's White, it's Parker, and Amari Cooper. Now, as I've talked about before, and I'll talk about it again, there's no question in my mind that without the off-the-field crap, and if he would have actually played in 2014, that hands down the number 1 wide receiver in this class would be Dorial Green-Beckham. He would be the number 1 guy. You're talking about a guy at 6'6", with that length, has enough explosiveness to be able to get just enough separation, has a great ability to use his body, make that big-time spectacular catch, remind some people maybe of Vincent Jackson or an A.J. Green or what have you. Reminds me some maybe of a Mike Evans. Either way, you're looking at this type of guy. I think in this draft, he is the most purely physically gifted wide receiver, and he's perhaps the receiver with the most upside. But you're also talking about a guy that didn't play at all, at Oklahoma in 2014 after he transferred from Missouri when he got kicked off the team. You're also talking about a guy with numerous off-the-field incidents, and that has to bring you pause and has to bring you concern, and that has to drop him down my board too. That's a part of the equation. Can you trust this guy? Is he going to be reliable to be able to play each and every single week, or is he going to get himself in trouble? Is he going to be a cancer in the locker room? Is he going to be a guy that gets some money and he's not going to work hard? But with that said, it wouldn't surprise me, with the rookie seasons, if Dorial Green-Beckham gets in the right situation, he has the best rookie season out of all of these wide receivers. In terms of this class overall, I look at my board and I see maybe 7 to 8 guys that I could actually justify going in round number 1. I even look at guys like Jaelen Strong. I know he's got problems with the wrist, but here's a guy that really has the ability to use his body well and be able to make those big-time tough catches in traffic. Here's a guy that I view as a late first-round prospect, similar to a Devin Smith, who does it in an entirely different way, somewhat similar maybe to a Victor Cruz. I personally wouldn't have much of an issue with the team late in round 1 taking a guy like a Phillip Dorsett out of Miami or a Tyler Lockett out of Kansas State, 2 type of slot weapons that I think are very versatile, bring a lot of explosiveness to the table, and a guy in Tyler Lockett, again, that I think is going to be underdrafted compared to the type of prospect that he actually is, will end up far outproducing his draft slot at the NFL level. Now, to me, the most head-scratching prospect of all in this 2015 NFL draft class is Breshad Perriman from Central Florida. I understand he's got the NFL pedigree from his dad, former Lions wide receiver Brett Perriman. I understand the guy can run in the 4.2s and the 40, and that's all fine and good. But if the guy can't fucking catch, he can't fucking catch. And yes, he made some big explosive plays at Central Florida, but a lot of times he didn't make the consistent catches that were needed, and he made far too few of the spectacular ones to compensate for all the drops and failed catches that he did have. I look at him and I see a second-round prospect. If some teams want to gamble on that speed and athleticism and NFL pedigree late in round 1, so be it. I might question it a little bit, but not a ton. But I'm starting to see, talk about him being a mid-first round pick and actually belonging in the mid-first round. That's way too rich for my blood. I just think in a good wide receiver class, there are too many other sure things, too many other better, more complete options, too many other safer picks to sit there and gamble on a Breshad Perriman in the middle of round 1. Now, I think he will go somewhere between maybe 15 to 25, but I think that's about 20 slots too high in this draft, in my opinion. In terms of guys that I think will go late day 2, early day 3 that will end up being very productive NFL players and, again, outplaying their draft slot. I look at guys like Rashad Greene from Florida State. I look at guys like Justin Hardy from East Carolina. Those are a couple of guys that really stand out to me in terms of guys that can get into the right system, find their role, and be incredibly productive at the NFL level. Even Tyler Lockett, like I said, I grade him as my number 7 wide receiver in this class. I envision him being a 3rd to 4th round pick. He's another guy that I would throw into that mold. You have some of these great athletes, the guys like the Jamarcus Nelsons, the Chris Conleys, the Stefon Diggs. Maybe they get themselves into the right situation and a team is able to coach them up and they're able to get something out of them. Another interesting wide receiver to watch is Devin Funchess from Michigan. Here's a guy that for some reason the Michigan coaching staff decided to switch from tight end to wide receiver in 2014, and I think his draft stock hurt and suffered as a result. But here is a guy that does have that size that you would love to have outside from a number 1 wide receiver. Does he have enough quickness? Does he have the speed outside? Does he have the ability to get enough separation? I don't know. Sometimes he reminds me of an Alshon Jeffrey on film, somebody that I didn't like coming out of South Carolina, but now obviously as a Bears wide receiver I have to like because he's proven himself out to be at least, if nothing else, a top flight number 2 NFL wide receiver. So you look at a guy like Devin Funchess, who doesn't make quite the spectacular big-time plays that people might associate with the guy of his size, but he could end up, again, being a real steal, or he could be drafted by a team and they end up playing him a tight end, which might be his better NFL position. But again, you can look at all my rankings for this wide receiver class in the description box down below. Like I said, I don't think it's as good of a class as 2014, just from the standpoint of I think the talent at the top was better last year, and I think the overall depth of the class all throughout the draft was better last year. But this is still a really good, really strong class. And if your team doesn't dip into this wide receiver class in 2015, whether it's a need or not, I think it's a big-time mistake.